Thank you, Mr. Dobbin. It's a real pleasure to serve under your chairmanship. And also, it's a real privilege and a pleasure to see the Minister in his place, for whom I have great admiration and respect. I'm delighted to be able to have secured a debate on road safety, an issue which affects each and every one of us in society, because at some point and at some stage we'll be using our roads. And it's also an issue which has been raised with me by many of my constituents, by charities which are campaigning for safer roads, and also by many other organisations. Mr. Dobbin, it's only fair at the very beginning I outlined my declaration of interest. I was once a named champion of road safety for drink driving by brakes. It's only right that I put that on the record. And also, I do understand the issue of road safety is covered by two departments. It's covered by the Department of Transport, but equally in relation to sentencing of matters such as drink driving, that's covered by the Ministry of Justice, but there is greater collaboration on that very matter. Every death on our roads is an avoidable tragedy, every injury a preventable suffering. Our roads have become safer and are amongst the safest in the world, but last year there were still more than 195,000 casualties reported to the police. We should not lose sight of the achievements that have been made in improving road safety. Last year there were comparatively fewer fatalities in the UK than in most other countries in Europe and the rest of the world. In 2012, there were one-third the number of people killed on our roads compared to 20 years ago. But more can and should be done to reduce the harm of using our roads. In November, it was Road Safety Week, which since 1997 has been organised by BRAKE and involves schools, organisations and community groups in taking action to improve road safety. It is a reminder that we can make our roads even safer and reduce tragedy and injury by all working together. This is only a short debate, so I want to focus on some key issues which are contributory factors to road casualties. The first one, drink driving, driving whilst disqualified, and driver distractions. And I know colleagues may have other issues which they want to put to the Minister in relation to road safety, and they should do that. The first one, drink driving. We all know the dangers posed by those who choose to drink and drive. The Department for Transport figures show that the number of deaths from drinking and driving has increased 17%, accounting for 16% of all road deaths in the United Kingdom. The latest review into drink driving laws in 2010 by Sir Peter North noted it is a minority of drivers who persist in drink driving, and many of those caught are well above the legal limit. A staggering 40% were 2.5 times over the limit. And many go on to re-offend, and there are more than 12,000 people per year who are convicted of drinking and driving offences who have previously been convicted of that offence. This year, I proposed my 10-minute rule bill to raise the maximum prison sentence for repeat drink drivers from 6 months to that of 2 years, to give the courts the additional powers that they need to tackle persistent offenders. Of course I give way.
I'm grateful to the member for Gillingham Rainer for giving way, and I congratulate him on securing this debate. I know it's an issue that he feels very strongly about. But will he agree with me that part of the problem as the law stands at the moment is when magistrates are faced with a defendant who has been convicted of multiple drink drives and driving whilst disqualified at the same time, even with high readings, after they are required to give them some sort of discount for a plea of guilty, their powers of punishment at the moment are insufficient. That's very frustrating for them when they're trying to mete out justice.
Yeah. I'm grateful to my honourable member from Dartford, and what he says is absolutely right, because that's something which I know he sees at the very outset when he was a solicitor and dealt with these cases, and I saw, when I was a barrister in courts, and you saw where, the police and all the other multi-agencies found it so frustrating where an offender was brought to court, yet the sentence that can be given was very limited, and in my view very minimal, for these serious offences which they had been convicted of, and taking into consideration the danger they posed to the wider society. So he is absolutely right in relation to the combination of these offences coming together. And normally what you would get, and he is right, it's where you have somebody who's been drink driving, they're also probably been done for driving whilst disqualified at the same time. So he is right, and I'm going to refer to driving whilst disqualified in due course, but the point he makes is a very valid point, and I thank him for supporting the 10-minute rule bill on drink driving, repeat offenders, which I presented, and the presentation bill on driving whilst disqualified. Mr. Dobbin, continuing from where I was earlier, it is a measure that has the support of BRAKE, RAC and ROSPA. And equally, linked to drink driving, I see today in the Times there's been an article by BRAKE, Julie Townsend, the Deputy Chief Executive, who says even one drink is now too many for most drivers, urging the government to look at reviewing what is happening in other parts of Europe and asking that the legal alcohol limit should be reduced from where it is at the moment. And no doubt the Minister can comment on that in due course. The first question that I want to ask the Minister is this: what is the government doing to address persistent drink drivers? The second question is, will the government support my bill to raise the maximum sentence to 2 years for repeat offenders? And the third question on this category is, will the government also consider reviewing sentencing guidelines for drink drivers? Moving on to the second category of my points, and that is driving whilst disqualified. Linked to repeat drink driving offenders is those who repeatedly drive whilst disqualified, the point made by the Honourable Member for Dartford. In reply to my recent parliamentary questions, government figures show that in 2012, 42% of offenders sentenced for driving whilst disqualified had received a conviction for the same offence within the previous 10 years, and 72% of offenders who received a custodial sentence had been convicted for the same offence over the past decade. As in the case with drink driving, the maximum sentence for driving whilst disqualified is 6 months imprisonment or a level 5 fine. This is an issue that the Magistrates Court Association has raised with me, and they say their members are concerned by the many instances of this, sometimes repeated very many times, and are frustrated that their powers of imprisonment are insufficient. Last week, I introduced 2 bills to strengthen the law around driving whilst disqualified. The first bill will increase the maximum sentence a driver can receive for causing death whilst disqualified from the current 2 years to 14 years imprisonment. This is in line with the current penalty, as I say, for causing death by dangerous driving. My second bill will increase the maximum jail sentence for 2 years for repeat offenders who continue to drive even though they've been previously banned. My fourth question to the Minister is this: will the government also consider the case for increasing the maximum sentence for disqualified drivers and support my bill? Question 5, will the government consider reverting driving whilst disqualified to an either-way offence as it was prior to 1988? I understand these are issues that are predominantly dealt with by the Ministry of Justice, but their implications on road safety are immense. Dealing with the category alcohol locks, the contribution of existing measures in reducing drink driving seem to have decreased because there is a hard core of heavy drinkers who are not susceptible to existing measures. Therefore, we need to look at new ways to reduce drinking and driving. A number of EU countries, including Sweden, France and Holland, have introduced alcohol ignition interlocks, commonly referred to as alcohol locks, which work as an alcohol tester connected to the startup mechanism of the car. They've been found to help reduce repeat offenders, especially when used as part of a program of rehabilitation. Various international studies have shown from 65 to 95% fewer repeat offences for users of alcohol locks compared to drivers with a suspended driving licence or a revocation. The previous government conducted a trial programme in 2005, but there was never any follow-up. The North Report in 2010 discussed the use of alcohol locks and said that trials had shown that there are merits in such initiatives, as when they are in use, they prevent people from drink driving. There is also existing powers in place, but not in force, under the 2006 Road Safety Act, for offenders to be referred to an alcohol ignition programme. Recently, the European Commission has been working on developing a common road safety enforcement strategy, which could introduce, which include making use of alcohol locks in certain cases. My sixth question to the Minister is this: what recent assessment has the government made of the effectiveness of introducing alcohol locks in the United Kingdom? Question 7, will the Minister consider the evidence from the European countries on the potential benefits of introducing them? And question 8, what discussions have been taking place to introduce alcohol locks across the European Union? Moving on to the other category which I briefly want to touch on, and that is that of high-risk offenders. This year the government made a welcome move to tighten up the rules for high-risk offenders which are those who have been caught more than 2.5 times over the legal limit, have 2 or more convictions for drink driving within 2 years, or who refuse to provide a sample. This means that they must pass a medical examination to prove they are fit to drive before they can do so. Although the scheme has shown to help reduce reoffending, there are concerns that 1/5 of high-risk offenders have previously been on the register before. Evidence shows that at 2 times the legal limit, you are at least 50 times more likely to be involved in a fatal accident. So question 9 to the Minister is this: what consideration has been given to lowering the level of high-risk offenders to 2 times the alcohol limit? Question 10, how effective has the scheme been in ensuring that those people who should not be driving are not on the road? And moving on to the category, my final category, and that is distractions. The theme of this year's Road Safety Week was Tune In, asking people to tune in to road safety and give it full attention. Driver distraction is a major cause of deaths and serious injuries on our roads. Research shows that whilst it's now illegal to use mobile phones at the wheel, around 1/3 of drivers continue to flout the law. Other distractions can include eating and smoking at the wheel, which is shown to increase the risk of a crash. It has been said that evidence suggests that talking on the phone can be worse than drinking alcohol, with reaction times 30% slower whilst using a hands-free phone when driving with blood alcohol level of 80 milligrams per 100 millilitres of blood. So my final question to the Minister is this: will the Minister review the evidence on the dangers of hand-free mobile phone use when driving? And in conclusion, further measures are needed if we are to remain a world leader on road safety, and we need to consider ways to reduce deaths and injuries on our roads. And I look forward to the response from the Minister on those questions I've outlined. Thank you.
Yes, before I ask the Honourable Member to speak, I just want to inquire if he has permission from
He has indeed.
the date and the Minister. Thank you. So Peter Botten.
I'm grateful to the Minister and to my colleague, and I congratulate him for introducing this debate as part of his battery of attention. Can I add a few words that go beyond the law and go away from enforcement? I had responsibility for road casualty reduction from 1996 to 1999. We set out a plan to reduce the fatalities, serious injuries, and by mistake the slight injuries by 1/3 by the year 2000. Since then, successive generations, both of ministers and of road users, have reduced the deaths from about 5,600 a year to about 1,750. The numbers will fluctuate. The year before there's a slight increase, then for last year there's a significant reduction. Part of that's chance, part of it's due to factors beyond what we actually do. What is clear is what road users do themselves that makes the biggest difference. Safer roads, yes. Safer vehicles, yes. Better medicine, yes. The biggest change, as my honourable friend has mentioned, has been in the consequences of over-the-limit drink driving, where the deaths have come down from 1,200 a year to about 200, so that over 4/5 of the consequences of people driving having had about the equivalent of a bottle of wine or more have come down. And that was not done by enforcement. There's been no change of law, no change of sentencing, no change of penalties. It's come about because more hosts have provided alcohol-free drink and expect people to take it, more passengers have picked alcohol-free drivers, and more people who drink and drive like me decide in advance or try to, is he going to be drinking tonight or is he going to be driving? I would argue that learning those lessons probably do as much good, if not more, than some of the proposals put forward by some groups. I faced 20 years ago, constant demands for a lower limit, so automatic conviction for people at lower limits of alcohol in their body. Those weren't the prime people. As my honourable friend has rightly said, it's the people at twice the legal limit or above, and I would support his suggestion that bringing the excess over the limit down from 2.5 to 2 times at least would work. I'd also suggest that we ought to think of bringing in sureties, so that people who have been convicted at well above the legal limit should have to pay money over the months that they're disqualified into a fund, which they get back if they're not caught offending drink driving over the next, say, 5 years. So instead of trying to put a sudden fine on at the end, have money which they've got in the bank, which they get back if they've shown that their alcoholism or their other behaviour can be controlled. I will end my brief contribution by saying to the Minister that I intend today to put down some written questions on one part of the road environment, which I know he's familiar with. I don't ask him to answer this today, but I shall be asking on the contrast between Pelican and Puffin crossings, particularly whether it's right to allow any local highway authority to maintain and keep any Pelican crossing with multi-lane approaches. We only have to look around some of the Pelican crossings around Westminster to see the dangers. I would ask him whether any highway authority is installing Pelican crossings now, and whether they should be required to get his permission to put in a Pelican crossing rather than a Puffin crossing. We all know that most of us are doing the things we learnt 10 or 20 or 30 years ago. Well, 10 or 20 or 30 years ago, we weren't aware of the dangers of Pelican crossings compared with Puffin ones. Now, the Safer Road Foundation with Michael Woodford, with the support of PACT, the Parliamentary Advisory Council on Transport Safety, have raised this issue. They've used the research from the Transport Research Laboratory, and I think it's time that in Parliament, we, through the Minister, put pressure on local highway authorities to say no more Pelican crossings, and those which do exist should not be renewed as Pelican crossings, and if you intend to put in a Pelican crossing, explain why you think it's going to be safer than putting in a Puffin crossing. It's time that we took this automatic way of reducing risk and reducing the casualties associated with those risks.
Much indeed, Mr Dobbin. You seem to have drawn the short straw again, having me in one of these debates. Could I congratulate my honourable friend, the member for Gillingham and Rainham, on securing this debate. Road safety is an issue which has long been close to my own heart as well. The UK is a leader, a world leader in road safety, and our statistics show fewer deaths per million population than almost any other EU country, and almost a factor of 4 lower than the United States and fewer than Germany or France. From 2011 to 2012, the number of people killed in road accidents reported to the police decreased by 7.7% to 1,754. This is the lowest figure on record. The number of casualties also reduced by 4%, including a reduction in the number of people seriously injured. However, there is no room for complacency. Every death and serious injury is a tragedy, and it remains vital to reduce the numbers of people killed and seriously injured on the UK's roads. Even one death on our roads is too many. Many of the issues that the Honourable Member raised in terms of sentencing and penalties are matters which the Justice Department would probably expect me not to encroach on their territory too far on, but I do hope that we can have an engagement with the Justice Department, Transport and the Honourable Member to look at how we can review from some of these, and I'm assured that all penalties are constantly under review in the light of experience. Turning to drink driving and repeat offenders, I share the Honourable Gentleman's concerns over the impact of drink driving. Indeed, the Honourable Member for Worthing West outlined his own involvement of this, and I must admit, having not thought about it for very long, but his idea of a surety that could be built up to be returned to the driver should he be successful in not drinking and meeting the medical requirements does seem, certainly at the outset, like a sensible idea. And I also note the point he makes about Puffin crossings. I have had a meeting with the Honourable Member and those who have produced a very useful video which shows some of the dangers of people crossing at multi-lane crossings using the old Pelican crossings. We have a proven strategy for tackling drink driving and repeat offenders, which combines legislation, enforcement, engineering and communications. And we work closely with the police and other organisations on education and communicating drink drive messages in a consistent way. We've seen a step change in public attitudes towards drink driving as a result, and indeed the current generation of young people see it as a complete no-no to drink and drive. Since 1979, drink driving casualties, deaths and serious injuries have fallen dramatically, and there's been an almost six-fold reduction in the number of people killed in drink drive-related accidents and a similar drop in seriously injured casualties. In 2011, we saw the lowest level of drink driving fatalities since detailed reporting began. Provisional figures suggest that the number of people killed in drink drive accidents in 2012 increased by 17% compared with 2011, from 240 to 280. However, this estimate is provisional and based on a limited sample of data, and it will be finalised next year when a more complete sample is available. The provisional sample is based on a large degree of uncertainty and a significant revision. We've seen significant revisions in previous years. Yes, Bonnie.
This extra help suggestion is perhaps more for the Department of Justice and the courts. When there's an inquest or a prosecution, when there's been a death through over-the-limit drink driving, can we make the suggestion that inquiries should be made and presented to the court as to where the person was drinking, who knew they were drinking, who knew they were driving, and whether they did anything to try to dissuade the person from driving after heavy drinking?
I'm sure those listening to this debate in the Justice Department will have taken heed of the point he makes, but it's certainly the case that part of our campaign over Christmas, and indeed one police force in the country has been encouraging people to shop their mates who insist on drinking and driving, and often it's the case that people do try to remove the keys from the driver and they still insist on driving. The Honourable Member mentioned the drink-drive limit. My current view is that we should not reduce the drink-drive limit. We have a gold standard limit and a gold standard penalty. And although there are other countries around the European Union that have a lower limit, they also have lower penalties. And I wouldn't want to demote the offence of drink driving to one that would be seen in a similar bracket with speeding or other motoring offences. So I believe that the decision that was made in review some years ago is the right one, to stick with our drink drive limit and to stick with the disqualification, which is the penalty that really makes people sit up and take notice. In terms of campaigns and communications, just last week I launched the Think, Drink, Drive campaign, highlighting the snowball effect that a drink driving conviction can have on one's future job prospects. Up to 1 million people work in jobs where they could lose as a result of a drink drive conviction, and almost a third of people who would have to give up their job because they rely on their car to get to work. Additionally, it could affect a person's chance of getting another job because any employer can ask to see unspent criminal convictions, and drink driving is a criminal offence. A drink driving conviction can have a devastating impact on your personal life, leading to a driving ban, criminal record, job loss and even imprisonment. And this is the message that we're giving this Christmas. The Think, Drink, Drive campaign has been running for over 3 decades, and last week it was awarded a Prince Michael International Road Safety Award for the part it has played in helping to reduce drink-drive casualties. Last week also saw the launch of the 6th annual Coca-Cola Designated Driver campaign in partnership with Think, and this allows drivers to benefit from a buy one get one free offer on Coca-Cola products over the festive season. I must point out that other carbonated beverages are also available. So what new measures are being introduced? We're introducing new legislation through the deregulation bill to close the loopholes on drink drive enforcement. One of those loopholes is a so-called statutory option. If the lower of the driver's breath readings is below 50 micrograms per 100 millilitres of breath, they're entitled to have their breath sample replaced by a specimen of blood or urine. This measure has been in place since 1981 and was included due to concerns about the reliability of evidential breath testing devices at the time. But this process can lead to delays in obtaining the specimen when there isn't a resident healthcare professional at the police station. These delays can result in a negative blood or urine test. Roadside breath testing machines have developed since their introduction, and there are no longer concerns about reliability. Over 30 years on, it is time the statutory option is removed. And we're improving devices further. Roadside evidential breath testing devices are currently being type approved by the Home Office. Once this process is complete, police officers will be able to collect evidential specimens at the time the offence is committed. We're supporting this by removing the requirement for a preliminary breath test where a roadside evidential breath test is performed. This means that in difficult operational scenarios, police officers will only need to take 2 breath specimens instead of 3. Another measure is to allow registered healthcare professionals to take blood specimens in hospitals. This makes blood collection consistent with that in police stations and streamlines the process. Drink drivers pose a grave risk to other road users. Repeat offenders are a particular cause for concern because previous contact with the criminal justice system has evidently done little to change their behaviour. I appreciate why my honourable friend is keen to ensure that appropriate maximum penalties are available to the courts when dealing with these cases. The Ministry of Justice is looking at this issue, and I do not wish to preempt the outcome of that work, but I can assure the House that the Government agrees that these are important issues and we are considering them very carefully. In the meantime, we will continue to work to improve preventative and enforcement measures to deter drink drivers and to communicate the implications of drink driving convictions. Turning to drug driving, yeah, by all means.
Rehman Chishti.
Recently I was made aware of a campaign where some parts of the country are giving people £1,000 to shop an individual they think is susceptible of drinking and driving. Does the Minister agree with me that is completely and utterly unacceptable to use taxpayers' money for that? What we should be doing is the good thing to do, because it's the right thing to do by making the authorities aware where somebody is about to commit a crime, rather than having incentives for reporting a suspected crime.
I did wonder when I saw that campaign, I think it was Derbyshire Police that were doing this, that whether it was more about getting some headlines than actually about getting many people to shop their mates, so to speak. But I will be interested to see the effects of that particular campaign. But it certainly did get publicity for this issue and hopefully will deter even more people from drink driving. Turning to the issue of alcohol interlocks or alcolocks, these are relatively recent development in drink driving, and these devices prevent operation of the vehicle engine if the driver provides a breath sample which is above a specified alcohol limit. The provision for introducing them was included in the Road Safety Act 2006. These devices are used in some countries to manage people with drink driving convictions, and experience suggests that they are effective whilst in use, but the drivers revert to offending once the interlock is removed. Better results have been experienced where a programme is closely supervised and supplemented by education and counselling. However, the driver can get around the alcolock in other ways, for example by changing the car they drive. The Department undertook research in 2009 into the practicalities of a judicial programme, and this concluded that the costs of implementing and enforcing a scheme are likely to be disproportionate. A scheme might also give those who could afford to take part the benefit of a discounted disqualification without evidence that this achieves a long-term change in drink drivers' behaviour. Therefore, there are currently no plans to implement the use of alcohol interlock devices, although I do understand some bus and lorry fleet operators do use these in practice. The Honourable Member asked about what discussions are going in the European Union. I can tell him that there have been some informal official level discussions on the pros and cons of the use of alcohol interlocks in EU member states, and we are aware that the European Commission launched a consultation on this issue earlier this year. This closed on the 15th of August 2013, and we have not yet received notification of the outcome, but there have been no formal proposals received from the European Commission in this regard. As with repeat drink drivers, drivers who flout driving bans are a significant risk to road users and an obvious concern if they're a repeat offender. Of these tragic cases where a driver causes a death, not only is a life being cut short, it can also have a devastating effect on the victim's family. Turning to high-risk offenders very briefly, high-risk offenders are drink driving offenders disqualified from driving for a number of reasons. And a person is a high-risk offender if they are more than 2.5 times over the legal limit for alcohol in breath, blood or urine. I'm not aware of any current plans to change that, but I hear the representations the Honourable Member has made. They also fall into this category if they fail to provide a specimen for testing or if they refuse consent for a sample taken when they're incapacitated to be analysed. Repeat offenders are also high-risk offenders. If someone has been disqualified twice or more within the space of 10 years for being over the legal limit or unfit to drive, they are a high-risk offender. Certainly, we are looking at the parameters there, and if my correspondence I receive from frustrated drivers who find it increasingly difficult to get their licence back, then certainly the system is working. In summary, Mr Dobbin, I'm grateful to my honourable friend for his hard work in raising awareness and promoting the aims of road safety and for this opportunity to speak on the subject. I hope that I have demonstrated our degree of commitment to road safety issues. The UK has one of the best road safety records in the world, and we are working to ensure continued reductions in the numbers of people killed and seriously injured. Thank you.